Hello everyone and welcome. Thanks for checking out this tutorial on Blaze Animate. For those who don't know, Blaze Animate is a Blender add-on that makes animating way easier by letting you drag and animate right in the viewport. Just point, click, and animate. In this video, I'll show you how to get started with Blaze Animate and walk you through all the features. If you want to learn more about the add-on or get it for yourself, please check out the links in the description below. For this tutorial, I'll be using the Rain rig from Blender Studio. It's a great rig that really shows off what Blaze Animate can do. I'm using Blender 4.2, but don't worry if you're on a different version. Blaze Animate works with Blender 4.0 and newer versions. The Rain rig is perfect for this tutorial because it is well organized and it uses bone collections, which is a requirement to use Blaze Animate. Now, if you have rigs that don't use bone collections, it is very easy to assign bone collections to them, and then later in the video I'll show you how to. If you want to follow along with the same rig, you can grab it for free from Blender Studio. I've put the link to it in the description as well. Alright, let's get started by installing the add-on. You go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, click on this arrow, Install from disk. You head on to the directory where you downloaded the zip file, click on it, install from disk. Make sure this is checked, then you can close this window. Now, in order to activate the script, you need to make sure an armature object is selected and you're in pose mode. Then you hit N on your keyboard to bring up the sidebar or N panel. Then you click on this Enable Blaze Animate button, or you simply hit Ctrl-Alt-B on your keyboard. Now the script is activated. You see a list of bone collections available, which is identical to the list here under Data and Properties panel, with some features that helps you manage the collections. This button, Restore Collections, selects and activates the collections that were previously visible in the viewport or visible under the bone collections list here. Now notice that if collections are not selected here, they won't show up in the viewport. So if no collections are selected and highlighted as blue, you will see nothing in the viewport and you cannot manipulate any controllers. With this button, you can select all. With this button, you can deselect all. And this isolate mode button only works if you have collections marked for isolation. You can easily do that by clicking on this icon to the left of each collection. Let's say we need FK, IK, and face controllers to work on, and we don't need the rest for now. We mark them for isolation and then activate the isolate mode. When you're in isolate mode, you see a number to the left of each collection's name, which is the short key to activate it via your keyboard. Now, if you're on your keyboard, you hit 1, the first one gets activated, and you hit it again, it gets deactivated. This goes on for numbers 1 through 9. Now you can have more than 9 collections here in isolate mode, but only the first 9 of them will have the keyboard assigned to them. Now, there are settings to talk about, and I explain them later in the video, but I just want to mention that this shortcut overlays here can be deactivated here. You can adjust its opacity and its position. Now I prefer to work with this user interface collapsed, so you can do it with N to collapse the sidebar, so you have more room to work with. And you can activate the controllers in isolate mode as described. We now activated this base controllers via the shortcut 3 on the keyboard. Let's talk about the highlights. When a bone is selected, highlighted as white, and it means that it can be manipulated. So if you drag, a controller that is highlighted white will be moved. And if a controller is red, it means it is nearby. It's a visual feedback to help you select nearby controllers. If a controller is highlighted yellow, it means it is locked and no other controllers can be selected unless you unlock this one. We'll talk about this later. If a controller is highlighted as gray, it means it cannot be selected and manipulated. You can also hide bones, unhide them. We will talk about these all later. For now, I just wanted to go over the highlight colors to give you an overview of the highlights. So simply, if you want to manipulate a controller, you can drag, and when you're dragging, the visual feedbacks, the highlights are disabled for you to have less visual clutter and work more efficiently. Now, when a controller is selected and highlighted white, it is selected in its traditional way. So if you use any shortcut or any tool inside Blender, it works. So if you highlight a bone and use the G, R, S keys on the keyboard, you can easily use those default Blender tools. When a controller is selected and you hit Shift Control on your keyboard, it brings up a transform method pie menu, which you can select the preferred transform method for that bone, which is persistent, which means whenever you click on that bone and drag, that would be the default transform method. This transform method is stored and saved and can be preserved through Blender sessions. So if you save your Blender file now, close it and open it again, this transform method will still be set for this controller. Another short key is E. E disables the visual feedback and enables it if it is disabled. When it is disabled, it doesn't mean that you cannot manipulate the bones. You can manipulate, select, move the bones as before, just you don't see the highlights. You can add to selection. If you hit Shift and click on a bone, you can, while holding Shift, you can add to the selection. And if you release Shift, which means that you no longer want to add any controllers to the current selection, it automatically locks them so you can easily work with them. Now, in the locked mode, if you want to remove a controller from this locked selection, you can hold Shift and click on the controller you want to remove from the selection. If you want to get out of the locked mode completely, you just simply press Shift and Q. Double clicking on a controller will select its childs and parents. So basically entire hierarchy of a bone when you click on it. And you can easily deselect the ones that you don't want to manipulate. Another thing that is recently added based on a comment I got from a user on Reddit, and I found it useful, and I thank them for this, it is cycle selection. Cycle selections keep the recent transform bones. If you selected and not transformed the bone, it doesn't include that. But if you, let's say, move this bone, let's choose the move tool for this. Let's say you move a couple of controllers here, and you want to cycle the selection between them because this is a section you're working on and you're continuously reiterating between these bones. You hit Y key on the keyboard and it cycles selection between the recently transformed selections. In the user interface of Blaze Animate, you see under the selection, you'll see this transform history, which is the number of recent bones to be stored. This means 5 recent bones will be cycled through when you hit Y. If you set this to 10, then it will be 10 recently transformed bones that will be cycled through when you hit Y. For armature selection, let's say, let's disable the script for now. Go to object mode to make a duplicate from this. Let's say that you have multiple characters that you need to work on because let's say maybe a scene that multiple characters are interacting with each other and you need to switch armatures back and forth to tweak their pose and animation. Now let's just enable the script again. You can simply hold A on your keyboard and hover over the armature that you want to manipulate. Then that armature will be activated for manipulation. And the settings such as transform methods, freeze, frozen bones, locked bones, etc. all will be independent from each armature, so it is saved independently for better access. When you want to hide a bone, you hover over them. When they're in selection mode, you hit H on your keyboard. Easy. If you want to unhide all the hidden controller bones, you simply hit Alt H and they're back to their default position. Now, if you want to see active controllers all at once and permanently on your screen, you hit Shift A or Alt Shift A to enable or disable. To freeze a bone mean that bone is not selectable. It is visible, but it is not selectable. And you hover over them and hit F. Then again, if you want to unfreeze them, you simply hover over them. And when they have a bright, see here is it is not bright if you can see this. Okay, you see that this is not bright. But when you hover over them and it is bright gray, and if you hit F, you have unfreeze them and they can be manipulated again. Freeze cannot be manipulated, unfreeze can be manipulated. You can also freeze all. Now all the bones are frozen. See it. We hit Shift A to show all. And you can hit Shift F to unfreeze all. Now let's talk about the settings. Here in the settings, in the selection section, let's turn off the show all to demonstrate the settings. The hover range. Here, this indicates the number of pixels that is considered for the red hover highlights. This means that when your mouse is here, the controllers that are within 50 pixels will be highlighted red. So if you need to see more controllers, more nearby controllers, you increase this to 100 and you will see more controllers. For example, here, if we hover over this, we can see this controller too. But if it was 50, you wouldn't be able to see that. Okay, you can adjust this to your liking. Selection threshold is basically when your mouse is near a controller, how much near that controller should be for it to be selected. And it is also in pixels. So within 15 pixels, it will be selected. You may need to decrease this when the controllers are very dense to make your selections more precise. Blaze Animate is configured to always select the bone no matter how far the cursor is. So always at least one controller is selected no matter how far your mouse is from that controller. Okay, always have one controller selected. So it basically overrides this selection threshold if there are no bones nearby within that threshold. So if there are no bones within that 50 pixel threshold, it will automatically select the nearest controller. If you adjust this to a lower threshold and you see still controllers are being selected when you're far away from them, that's why. Density check radius. Basically, when there are so many controllers in an area, Blaze Animate automatically adjusts the selection threshold so you can select the controllers easier. And how does it do that? It checks a radius. It checks a radius of 30 pixels. You can adjust this as well. And if within that radius there are more than 3 controllers, it reduces the selection threshold by a factor that is set here. For example, within a radius of 30 pixels, we have more than 3 controllers. Blaze Animate multiplies selection thresholds by this factor, so it will be 1.5. If it wasn't like this, these 2 controllers that are very close to each other wouldn't be easily selected. The visual section of the settings, you can adjust the hover opacity, the proximity opacity. The hover opacity is this white highlights. If you decrease them, you can see that there will be less visible. The default is 0.8. Proximity opacity is basically the red highlights. You can decrease or increase them to your liking. The highlight width is the width of the lines. So you can increase them to a maximum of 4 to ensure that they're not overlapped. Or you can decrease them if you want to. Now, pin controllers on top. What does that mean? Let me activate the other collections as well. Let's say that you don't want the controllers to be shown over the objects at all times. By default, it is drawn over all the objects. It is not occluded by any objects here. Okay, so for example, you can see the hair controllers even from here and select them. To disable this behavior, you disable pin controllers on top. When you disable this, now they're occluded by the object. They're shown in a 3D space. Can be very useful in so many cases. But sometimes the controllers are so much occluded by the mesh that you may want to turn this on to work with it. Now, for rig setups that may not have bone collections assigned to them, it can be rigs that have been made before Blender version 4.0 or rigs that you may have downloaded from websites like Mixamo. For example, this character here called Peasant Girl, I've downloaded it from Mixamo to show you how to assign bone collections to it fast so you can use it in Blaze Animate. Let's get started. First, you need to make sure that an armature object is selected and you are in pose mode. Under data, in the bone collections, you click on this plus button, rename it to a group of bones that you want to assign, then choose the group of bones and click assign while the bone collection is selected. We repeat this for other bone groups. Very quick and easy. And it is done. We're finished setting it up. It may take more time for complex rigs, but that's basically how it is done. Now, when you enable Blaze Animate, the collections appear here, and then you can select the collections that you want to manipulate. Just note that if you don't have custom shapes and you're using bones themselves, they will appear in the hovers as lines, and you can do any kind of operation on them as you would normally do. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you for using Blaze Animate. I'm always open to the ideas, suggestions. If you have any problems, you can drop comments under this video or reach to me via the email put in the description. That's it. Have fun animating.